Welcome to the Cyber Sangha podcast. Cyber Sangha is a program of free live broadcasts, launched in 2009 by renowned teacher and author Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche. Join us as we draw on ancient Tibetan wisdom to discover how to connect with our best self and live to our highest potential. In the following conversation, Change Your Mind, Ease Your Pain, How Meditation Works to Relieve Pain and Suffering, happened on November 16th, 2022, as a dialogue with John Kabat-Zinn, Geshe Tenzin Wangyal, and host Alejandro Chaoul-Reich. This was part of a year-long series, Bring Body, Speech, and Mind to Life. This content is for informational purposes only. Listeners should consult medical professionals for any physical or mental health concerns. Please use headphones and do not meditate while driving or operating machinery.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Alejandro Chaoul, and I'm delighted to moderate this another dialogue in Cyber Sangha. Today, joining Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, we have John Kabat-Zinn. Welcome, John. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to say a little bit about Cyber Sangha, which really has had a great impact, particularly during COVID, but actually started before COVID, when Rinpoche really started realizing that people all over the world couldn't just travel and come to receive teachings. And so in a way to multiply the Dharma, being created Cyber Sangha, the cyber community. And through that, we have every month, we have a full moon practice that we kind of pass the baton all over the world, and we keep it 24 hours. It's a beautiful part of our month. And so welcome to join. These are all the other things that Rinpoche wants to do and keeps on doing through Cyber Sangha. These are all free programs, so people can connect in all these different ways. And so through that, we have the full moon practice. We also have Rinpoche's teachings. And what we've been doing is every month, we rotate from body, breath, or speech and mind. Although, of course, they're always intertwined. And then the other program are these dialogues. And so I'm delighted to be part of this. So let me introduce the speakers, although in this case, none of these need much of introduction. So let me start with John, who, having done his doctoral in molecular biology, really realized through his Buddhist practices, I believe particularly in the Zen tradition, that there was something that he could bring to the world, to the West, of these practices, particularly in the area of stress reduction. And he started that clinic in Massachusetts. And then, of course, the famous program that probably everyone knows, the MBSR, the mindfulness-based stress reduction. Probably most of you have read Full Catastrophe Living. And through that, really brought this to the world. And today, I think we owe to John the kind of the way that the word mindfulness is now become so popular in the world. It also probably went into directions that John wasn't expecting, and maybe we'll talk on that. But really, I mean, the way it has been brought into clinics, into different areas of life as almost like something that we all need to do, and particularly as we realize how much stress there is in the world. And so with that also, his upcoming book is Mindfulness Meditation for Pain Relief. And so one of the things that we'll talk today is a little bit about that as well. Now, Geshe Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche is really the founder of Cyber Sangha. And, you know, he has been trained in the East, right? He trained in Menri Monastery. in India, which is a Tibetan monastery. And by the way, Menri means medicine mountain. So there's some starting to get correlations here. And he also realized, kind of like John, kind of a little bit other way around, he realized that coming to the West was something where he can have an impact of bringing these ancient teachings, but in a simpler way. And in my opinion, and I've been a student of Rinpoche for 30 years, what he has done is, like, he has also studied us, the Western mind. And therefore, by that, he has been able to bring all this ancient training that he has as a Geshe and really kind of make it in a simple way. And one of the programs that makes it simple and profound, he called the three doors, what in Tibetan we say gosum, right? The three doors to that inner refuge, to that inner connection. And some of the things that we talk about that is also about pain body, pain speech, and pain mind. So we'll talk about that as well. So thank you both. It's such an honor to be moderating this dialogue between you two. But as I mentioned before, it's mostly about you dialoguing. I'll just say a few questions. But let me start, John, for this audience, that I wanted to ask you if you could start by saying something about what inspired you to bring these teachings into this simple way, particularly thinking of stress relief.
Well, thanks, Alejandro, and it's just an absolute pleasure for me to be on this program and in dialogue with you, Rinpoche, and you, Alejandro. So the thing is, I got into the meditation practice when I was 21 years old. And I like to ask people, how old were you when you got into your meditation practice? And everybody knows exactly how old they were and when that moment was, when they realized this was not going to be a fad for them, but that it had landed in some deep way inside. And that happened to me when I was 21, and I was a graduate student in molecular biology at MIT in the laboratory of Salvador Luria, who was a Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel Prize while I was in his lab. And it was a time of tremendous tumult with the Vietnam War going on, and MIT was very involved in making weapons of mass destruction, guided missile systems, and all sorts of things. And this was very much an issue of contention within the community in MIT. And a fellow named Philip Kapleau, who was somebody who had trained in Zen in monasteries in Japan, came to MIT. He was invited by a very famous professor named Huston Smith, who was a professor of religion and philosophy at MIT, and who had made a movie interviewing Krishnamurti, which was really a classical movie that brought Krishnamurti to in some sense, much more notoriety in the Western world. And, excuse me, so Huston Smith invited Philip Kapleau to give a talk, and I was walking down the corridor of MIT in 1965, and I saw a sign that said the 3 pillars of Zen. I didn't know what Zen was. I didn't know who Huston Smith was. I certainly didn't know who Philip Kapleau was. But for some karmic reason I cannot explain to this day, I went to that talk. And in the entire community of thousands of people at MIT, only 4 other people went to the talk. So there were like 6 people altogether in the room: Kapleau, and Huston Smith, and then myself and 3 other people. And his talk just took the top off my head, and I started meditating that day, and I never stopped. So that is the short story of how I got into the Dharma. And then I found, teacher after teacher and tradition after tradition, and really felt like, okay, molecular biology is really important and doing science is really important, but everybody is doing that among my graduate student colleagues, but nobody's looking at the nature of their own minds and who's doing all this science and who wants to get ahead and be ambitious and win the Nobel Prize. So I started to really bring that into my practice. And it's completely oriented my direction for all the years since then, and what I wanted to bring into the world in terms of work. And that's how MBSR finally came. We're meditating for 10 years on what is my job on the planet with a capital J, that I would love so much I would pay to do. And that's how MBSR finally came up in 1979. And I had the vision for it on a retreat at IMS, about the 10th day of a 2-week retreat. I had like a split-second vision of what might be possible, and then enacted it at the UMass Medical Center.
Thank you, John. Beautiful. Rinpoche, you were trained in a very classic Tibetan context, and then you came to the West. And I'm going to use John's word. What you realized, it seems that your job with a capital J in the planet was to teach in the West. Can you tell us a little more about that aspect, and when you realized that, yes, even though you trained, you were teaching in the monastery, and you said, my job is to go out?
So first of all, John, I wanted to thank you for coming on our program with your special, precious time sharing with us and our audience. So I just wanted to say thank you. So I, everything has kind of evolved over the years, and it was not like right in the beginning, it was not very clear. For me, I came out of very strong traditional sense of training, years of training, memorizing, the very intense training of Geshe, so like it's equivalent to PhD. So when you finish it, you also was very, very proud of the degree, proud of, instead of taming your pride and ego, you become very full of ego, and coming to the West with this full of ego. And so somehow I began to, have very clear opinion about if people wanted to study Buddhism, Dharma, they have to study this particular way. If not, then they cannot study. So, and people were not getting it. And I was pushing it, and people were not getting it. I was pushing it, and I was thinking, these people are never going to get it, So somehow, lack of compassion there, and but over the years, now all these years, I feel that somehow it's very naturally evolved that trying to communicate very, very simple things. So basically, when people come to the teachings, any teachers, like in Tibetan teachers, many times I realize they're not trying to convert into another religion. They're not trying to really become a Buddhist or Bin or any particular, most of them at least. They're really suffering. They're really kind of lost. They're really looking for something greater meaning than what they're doing. Their very everyday routines are, what their upbringings taught them, the culture taught them. They're looking for something more. And basically, the root of all of it is pain and suffering was the big part of it. So then from there on, and in a way, the Dharma is like that. Dharma is about really like to overcome suffering. So anyway, so that's how gradually everything evolved, and then the three roads started, the Cyber Sangha started, So that's a little bit of my journey. But so nowadays, I also tell that there's nothing very much new that I have to teach. So everything I have to teach, I taught already, and it will be every time it will be different ways that I'm trying to communicate the same thing.
Thank you, Rinpoche. You bring an important point, because, and in this last part that you were saying, many times you tell us, well, if you want knowledge, go to Guru Google. Don't come to me, right? And yet here we are. We're in the presence of two teachers, and we are here because we want to hear from you. And it's not that we want to hear necessarily something different, but the way that you both bring things into the world is different in a way. And so I want to acknowledge both of you on the ways that you bring this, and that having had the honor of being in the presence of both, that part is really important. And so even as much as we do things online, then even having this, but being in the presence, I think that's something really important that I find that sometimes it's hard to measure, right? It's hard to measure.
Well, you know, if it's all right for me to respond, I'm very touched by what you described, Rinpoche, because in a way it's like not getting caught in our own preconceptions or conceptualization about what the best way to bring the Dharma into the world is. And of course, suffering is the premier diagnosis of the human condition: suffering, greed, hatred, and delusion, and what it results in. And the question is how to skillfully reach people so that the power of deep introspection can actually be of some use to people. And that means coming from a non-dual perspective, because as long as you're trying to force yourself to be what you think the result of meditative practice would be, you're in this striving circumstance that actually prevents you from any kind of realization or recognition at all. So this non-doing, non-striving orientation is extremely important, but it's totally anti-Western, anti-American. We don't do something for no reason. We always want a result. Excuse me. So that was the basis of starting the MBSR program, was to actually see if it was possible to create a relatively time limited portal into fairly rigorous Dharma practice with medical patients who were really suffering, who were falling through the cracks, as I like to put it, of the healthcare system. And no matter what treatments they were getting, they were still suffering. And a lot of them were in frank physical or emotional pain. And rather than trying to fix them, which a lot of medicine is about repair and fixing, I make a big distinction between fixing and healing, or curing and healing. So curing is fixing, but healing is coming to terms with the actuality of existence and experience. And that's something that the Dharma practices, and in particular mindfulness and the various foundations of mindfulness as taught originally by the Buddha, seem to have like, well, if hospitals are dukkha magnets and they attract people, particularly because of the level of suffering, when it gets too much, you get carried to the hospital in an ambulance. And if you don't die, you're still alive. The question is there something you can do for yourself as a complement to whatever medicine and healthcare is trying to do for you that would actually enhance the potential for learning, growing, healing, and transformation that would not just last the 8 weeks of MBSR, but that would put you on a kind of trajectory of, in some sense, meditative practice, embodied meditative wisdom over the course of your life. And that's what it's wound up being. We're now in year 43 since the MBSR program started in 1979. And just last week, a study came out showing that MBSR is as good at treating anxiety disorder as the top drug therapy for anxiety disorder. That parallels the findings with mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, where there are now 6 or 8 very rigorous clinical trials showing the same thing for major depressive disorder. And if you look at suffering on the planet, if you add up everybody, anxiety disorders and depression, you've got like billions of people who are suffering, and where it's already been demonstrated that meditative awareness, if taught appropriately, and can actually be a doorway into well-being and not only reduce suffering, but to a certain extent catalyze wisdom, catalyze compassion, catalyze deep understanding of our common humanity, and the condition that we find ourselves on right now on planet Earth, where our human, sort of activity since the Industrial Revolution has given the planet a fever, and that's will affect the water supply for half of the people on the planet as we lose the glaciers and so forth, and flooding in Pakistan and all the various kinds of things. So there's a convergence of all of the different individual sufferings with the global human and multi-species sufferings. And the only thing that I can see that is up to the task of true healing and transformation and liberation is the Dharma. And any form in which it can be made available to people so that it's authentically transmitted and ignited, a passion ignited around it, so that it becomes a way of being, that it minimizes harm and maximizes well-being and kindness. I can't think of a more important energy that we need to nourish on this planet at the moment. And there's no one right way to do it, obviously. There are many different traditions within Buddhism. And, there's no point in fighting over which one is the most authentic or closest to the Buddha's original teaching. And in many ways, there's lots of contradictions among them. But the point is that what unifies is far greater than what divides. And we need a kind of universal approach to wisdom and compassion for the planet itself, as well as for us as individuals.
Thank you, John. So much there. And thank you for bringing that study that came out last week and had a lot of, it was in many media, and I think it's very important. Of course, what was also said there and what you just said is important, and we think there's an integrative medicine, right? That the patient is part of the solution. Mm. So sometimes,
the central part of the solution.
Central part of the solution. And sometimes I would say, the good news is that you're empowered to do it. Now, also the bad, quote unquote, is that you can only do it. No one can do it for yourself. And this is the part, right, where I think it's important. And you just mentioned that it's not just about, for example, in this case, reducing anxiety. By doing that, you're going to connect to wisdom and compassion. These are the extra benefits that come by you engaging with the practice instead of popping the pill, right? And I think this is also a very important part that it's sometimes missed in all the incredible studies that has been done. And so I think this is an important part. Rinpoche, I know you've been always interested in motivating me and others into, the science and how we see these results. So as you hear, and I know you've read about this study that has come out, what, from your perspective, what does this bring to you and say, yes, these studies show that meditation can be helpful. And as John said, many times we say this meditation or that meditation, but all these meditations. So how it resonates in you when you hear about science showing the benefit of these practices that you've been trained for decades and that you have in the lineage?
Yeah, so I think, whenever, first of all, congratulations for the the findings, and I think that's wonderful news, and we're definitely inspiring a lot of people. So I'm happy to hear that. So generally speaking, many times when I hear like different findings, that we've been doing a lot of different dialogues with science and different. Last in October, we have many different discussions about the different breathing aspect of the effect and the mind effect and so on. So every time with so many different findings, I'm not particularly surprised by any of them, because this is what's supposed to be. I mean, this is supposed to be. This is how we known to be. This is what reason why we do it. And so it's for us, in some sense, it's not any new findings. It's just more scientific data and analyzing, confirming something, which is wonderful. I think Western world definitely needs it. So I wanted to ask you, John, specific kind of a little bit like question to you, some thoughts. Because as you said, since 1979, 43 years ago, so you started with the MBSR, with basically based in stress reduction. So this new finding is also it's kind of helping with anxiety. So in generally, when we think about anxiety and stress or even sickness, physical sickness, it's a product of something, right? It's not like there's somebody is causing them, somebody is experiencing them. So, but it's of course, in the Western world, very much, as you said, it's spiritual materialism that somehow everything we do, we need to say why I'm doing it, what I get out of it, how much I get out of it, who is going to benefit it, how fast I'm going to get it, is it a free, is it a costly, always these are the typical Western questions, right? And as you said also earlier about who. So my always thought is that, I always finding a challenges as a teacher in the West, that whenever you're talking about the stress, when you are talking about the anxiety, when you are talking about the depression, when you're talking about these losses or declining energies, quality, sickness, suffering, obviously everybody knows that. So you don't need to have a degree. We are masters in suffering. So everybody knows it, everybody relates to it, everybody is interested in it. But when you go beyond it, when you're addressing question about who, not what you're suffering, why you're suffering, but the who is suffering, which is the most important question in the Dharma, in the Buddhism, is the most important question, which is most difficult thing in the West to talk about. Even, Western psychologists. I mean, I have many students who are psychologists, and whenever we talk about the no self or selfless, they don't get it, and they don't want to get it. And just that,
I think we can do something about that, actually. And you're putting your finger, of course, on the non-dual aspect of this, and the whole question of who am I, which is its own deep koan, so to speak, in the koan, sort of traditions. But to actually investigate the nature of awareness. And when you investigate the nature of awareness, you can actually ask yourself questions, and they're very highly relevant to anxiety or physical pain or emotional pain of any other kind. And the whole question of who's suffering, or who's thinking, who's experiencing these emotions. And when you ask people to actually investigate in that way, very interesting things happen. So there's a certain kind of openness or innocence because we never get taught anything like that in school. We're always taught to build up a sense of self, a sense of who I am, a sense of, what's most important. But in terms of this personal narrative. But when you ask questions, and I like to do this a lot with large groups, like, how many of you in the room are breathing? And of course, everybody just instinctively raises their hands. And then I'll say something like, is that really actually the case? Because let's face it, if it were up to you to keep the breathing going, you would have died a long time ago. You got distracted, got a phone call, thought about some text you should have sent, and then whoops, you'd be dead. So you're not actually, whoever you think you are, that you is not allowed anywhere near the brainstem and the phrenic nerve and the diaphragm that's keeping you breathing, whether you're asleep or whether you're awake. And in choosing to kind of provoke people in this kind of a way to think about it, the question of like, we taught because we say I'm breathing or it's my breath, and then like, well, let's investigate that, and then rapidly you begin to realize I'm not even thinking. It's not fair to say that I'm thinking. It's more like I'm being plagued by thoughts, like storms in the mind, and I'm the one that's suffering from these thoughts that I'm not even generating, or emotions that come along with the thoughts. That gives you an enormous space for the non-dual element of no place to go, nothing to do, and no particular something to strive to attain, but instead realizing your awareness can actually hold all of that. And then you can ask interesting questions like, is my awareness of my pain in pain or suffering? Is my awareness of my fear frightened? Is my awareness of my sadness sad? And when you ask people to investigate, you don't give them the answer because there's no right answer. But when they look, they say, actually, in this moment, I can hold the intensity of sensation in the body. And what it is intense sensation in the body, but my awareness of it is not actually in pain. Well, that's an enormously liberating discovery, and we didn't give it to them. People get it for themselves. And that's how we learn and grow and heal and transform. So that's a kind of like a little encapsulation of how we can take something that, if you do it from a philosophical angle, no self or anatta, it becomes really problematic when you approach it through cognition and thinking, because then it becomes more like teaching philosophy. And no matter how good you are at teaching philosophy, people are coming because of suffering, not because of philosophy. So it's much better to enter through the first foundation of mindfulness, or the body, and then the second foundation, Vedana, and in that way begin to investigate for yourself. And that's very freeing.
So what you're saying is the asking who, but originally when the MBSR base meditation, it's not so much exploring that idea of who, right? It's more like a focus awareness base. Is that correct? Or
for me, it all comes in the same package. What the teacher chooses to use or call on in any one moment really has to do with what's going on in the room, what people bring into the room, the levels of suffering, what people are expressing in their faces. So from the very beginning, I might start with that non-dual orientation of like, yeah, you come in with a story, you come in with a diagnosis, you come in with an aspiration for the pain to go away and for me to be back to the way I used to be when I was 20 years younger or whatever. And that's all very fine. But now we're going to drop into right in this moment, how is it? And we'll just investigate like as if for the first time with beginner's mind. So in a way, I don't think there's any intrinsic problem. And I see everybody as a kind of genius. So people are ready for this. It's not like, well, we have to start in kindergarten, then get to graduate school, and then we can do, a deeper form of Dharma. No, I feel like, first of all, we don't have time for that. So the question is, can we bring the entirety of the Dharma right into the present moment and then skillfully nuance what we do as a function of who's in the room and what's coming up in the present moment, and then utilize whatever's coming up skillfully to actually bring these teachings to the fore in the way that people will go home and practice them during the week and come back and really look at like who's suffering, who thinks their life is over, who is depressed, who is anxious, and the narratives that we generate about I'm a failure or I'm too old or all of that kind of stuff. So I think the beauty of the Dharma is that it's all in every piece of itself. It's like, it's like a multifaceted crystal where you take any tiny little piece of it, you get the actual entire thing, like Indra's net, the image of Indra's net. So that's the kind of way I approach it with the people who are coming. And then, of course, you see everybody who comes into the room as, potential students of meditation as Buddhas. It's not like we're going to fix them or do anything to them, but more help them discover their authentic true nature, so to speak. And it's not their story about who they are. So learning to differentiate the story of me from pure awareness, that's the whole curriculum. I mean, because pure awareness, when people ask me, well, what is mindfulness? Frankly, it's pure awareness. And you don't have to get it. You already have it. It's just that it's like the obscurations. There's all sorts of brambles and bushes that, you have to clear a path to your own awareness. You have to develop access to awareness, but the awareness is your birthright. It's part of being human. So that also makes it a lot easier in the long run. What's your experience of that, Rinpoche? How do you walk that line between the instrumental and the non-instrumental dimensions of Dharma?
Yeah, so I as I said earlier, I think our conversation is wonderful that, I completely agree with you that whole idea about, who is ready, everybody's ready, everybody's equally ready, no matter how many books you read, no matter how long you have studied. And we have the mind, we have the nature of mind. Everybody has this different stories, and everybody has this potentiality to discover that. And that's what actually what I been teaching for many years now in our 3-door training program. Basically, one of the training programs, we say people have to do transformations, personal transformations, like they have to, whatever issues they have in their on a sense of identity, pain identity, they have to recognize that, recognize that in different aspect of it. And then you have to kind of recognize also your pain speech, that like the one who's complaining, the one who's very critical, that one is very judgmental to yourself and others, to recognize that pain voice in yourself. And then, pain, we talk about pain body is we are referring to the identity. So yeah, we definitely let people come with their story. So we will not give you, we'll basically give them homework saying, what's your story? What is your pain body? What is your pain speech? What is your pain mind? You have to recognize 21 of them. So for somebody said one time, I haven't spoken with my sister for a very, very long time. So finally I recognize my pain body and working on it. And finally, I'm able to open up my heart and I'm able to reach out to her. And now we are very, very close, something like that. So basically, recognizing that pain identity within yourself, you work with that, with your movement in your body, you work that through your breath, you work that with your pure awareness, you work with the body, speech, and mind, basically breath. So you work that in the end, then you are able to see actual changes in your life. The relationship was lost, you found back. Relationship was almost breaking out, you reconnected back. Your sense of self was totally lost. Now you have some sense of you have found yourself. So yeah, so very much experiential directly. That's what basically I've been doing it. And and you never run out of material. It's not
No.
like a volume. So yeah, because they always have so many new stories to tell, and
Right.
you work
Right.
with every new story, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And in the end,
sorry, John. If I may add, just to
yeah,
put
please,
what,
go for it.
what you were saying as narratives. This is exactly, how we get so hooked into those narratives, and that's what Rinpoche called, kind of the pain speech, or even the way that we see our body, the pain body, and even the pain mind. And so these narratives are exactly how we realize that, and then we're able, as Rinpoche, to transform and to get what you're calling about, that pure awareness, right? And so there's different path into something quite similar.
Yeah, and you learn how to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So yeah, maybe. So this is what we do is what I call it: spacious, luminous, warm hug. Three things: spacious, luminous, warm hug. Reason why we have three things: spacious means it's referring to openness. Luminous is referring to awareness. Warmth is referring to the dynamic energy which arises between the spaciousness and luminosity.
Yeah,
So
compassion.
compassion. So is a image that we give. We say, look at yourself, the one who is afraid or the one who feels not good enough, because you are acting out in the world how you value yourself. You never go for things you deserve it, but you always think you don't deserve it because you don't value yourself, because you think you are not good enough. So who is not good enough? First, just go inside.
Beautiful.
Go inside, look at that, and then sit with that, feel it, and then slowly you, image-wise, you can say, "I'm going to give you this spacious, luminous, warm hug." Means just stay open, stay connected and open. Not analyze it, not suppress it, not elaborate it, not trying to change it. Just being with it. It's like being open to it. Luminous means being aware of it, just feeling it, allowing it, and then this sense of caring and warm hug to it. So we let them sit there for like 15, 20 minutes. And in the end of that sitting, that the sense of this pain dissolves.
Yeah.
They don't feel is no longer there. And then once it's no longer there, we allow them to say, okay, you allow your new dynamic energy, what we call self. An energy could mean that I feel kind of different energy in my body. It could mean I find different voice in my, I can feel my voice. I have a different voice, or I can say I have some more strength in my mind, making some decisions. So it can, and whatever the energy are arising in their body, speech, and mind, we tell them allow it, not make it, but allow it.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's a very satisfying to have this kind of conversation, compare notes in this way, because basically what we're discovering is that human beings are capable of healing ourselves. We're capable of really dropping underneath all of the narratives and the various kinds of turmoil and tension in the mind, and dropping into awareness of thinking. And then you can ask or apprehend, are my thoughts actually mine? And are they actually real? In the sense of, like, because most of what we think is like not even close to correct. But it's very painful when we believe that we fall into those narratives of how we're no good, there's something wrong with us, we'll never, ever, and this and that. And the same with emotions, that, we ask people to sort of investigate, is my awareness of my pain in pain? That turns out to be a very powerful laboratory, because when you take the place of awareness, then what we were calling pain can become pure sensation. Unpleasant, yes, highly unpleasant, but one can hold it with a certain equanimity without any training even. You just realize that if you're inhabiting the space of awareness, then that's a refuge from suffering without it being an escape. And there's insight there. There's deep insight into the nature of mind and the nature of aversion and greed and so forth. And the same is my awareness of my fear, afraid, because everybody's anxious, but as soon as you drop into awareness, then fear is just another weather pattern in the mind and the storyline and so forth. So there's kind of a wonderful liberative element to doing this kind of work in a more materialist-oriented society that's always trying to find fixes and to idealize what the perfect state would be, and then you get to the perfect state, and you're missing the fact that it's already perfect. It's perfectly what it is in this moment. And if we stand in that particular place and put the welcome mat out for experience, as opposed to, no, I'll only be happy if I have this experience, but with that experience, or this body, no, I can't live in this body. Well, again, that's just the thought, but as long as you believe it, it's a prison.
Yeah, even the even the stressed or anxiety, depression, all the emotions, they are also, there's a reason why they are arising, or there's a reason why you're experiencing them. It's like it's your emotions. They're trying to breathe. Basically, if you don't allow them to breathe, they die. There's a kind of experience of death there, suffocating. But when emotions, dead body, they don't feel emotion. Dead person does not have emotion. So emotion is nothing wrong about it, because it's not that you need to create more fear, but when the fear is there, you should be happy that you are feeling fear, because fear is there.
It's a sign of life. It's a sign of life.
It's a sign of life and sign of process and breathing. And if you're aware of it, it clears. When you suppress it, it stays.
Exactly. Our philosopher Henry David Thoreau is famous. He went off to the woods for a couple of years to sit by Walden Pond, and it's very famous in American history. And he said, I went to the woods, in other words, I went on retreat, because I wanted to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what they had to teach, and not, when I came to die in that moment, discover that I hadn't lived. And that's a very, very big risk, is that if we live in our narratives, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant or neutral, but we're caught up in narrative the whole time, then at the moment of death or right before, you wake up and realize, oh my God, I was a prisoner of my own mental, sort of processes without any awareness that was a choice, that I didn't have to be a prisoner. In that sense, it's really liberative. And the same with, I often will use this wonderful poem by Emily Dickinson to help with that whole question of self and what you might call, non-self, the whole questioning of the nature of who am I. She wrote this beautiful poem using the personal pronouns that goes like this: me from myself to banish had I art, impregnable my fortress unto all heart. But since me, my assault myself, how have I peace except by subjugating consciousness? And since we're mutual monarch, how this be except by abdication me of me? So they create this enormous separation between who I am and what I want and what I don't have and what's wrong with me. And that's a prescription for dukkha. But the seeing of that is already the liberation from it in that moment. And hopefully people can be inspired through whatever doorway they enter into the Dharma. That, I like to say sometimes, doesn't matter what doorway you take. The important thing is to enter the room. And the room is, in some sense, the room of the human heart. And so it's just wonderful to see people in large numbers going from sort of the usual way that we avoid stress and pain and suffering and anxiety and then use medication to try to dull it and so forth, but instead enter into that room and open rather than close to it, and find out that it's possible to actually engage in these liberative meditative practices in a way that's so life-affirming and also health-affirming that it transforms your biology. And that's I think one of the reasons that mindfulness is kind of becoming more and more exponentially available in the world, and that more and more people want to actually devote serious time and effort to meditating, is because the science is demonstrating that something that looks a lot from the, you could make a lot of, make fun of meditators because it looks like nothing. You're just not doing anything. I mean, how could that be of any use? And yet it turns out that this non-doing, which is very different from nothing, actually drives what's called functional neuroplasticity and functional connectivity in the brain among very important regions that often don't talk enough to each other to regulate behavior and thought and emotion, and also drives changes in the epigenome on the chromosome, so that you actually upregulate and downregulate hundreds of genes that have everything to do with inflammatory processes at the level of the biology of the body, and it affects cell replication and cell senescence in terms of telomeres and telomerase and so forth. So it's like the science is saying, well, if even 1/10 of that is true, and let's say only 1/10 of that is true, because it will take another 100 years to find out what's really true about this, or maybe 1,000 years. But even if 1/10 of that is true, that's really motivating, because it's hard to convince people to take real time by the clock to practice what looks like nothing, unless it turns out that nothing turns out to be just about everything. And
Yeah.
and it is now turning out to be about life itself.
Yeah, it's like sleeping. So in a way, people in the West sometimes they kind of having so much problem with the sleep deprivation,
Right.
Not enough getting sleep. So it's because somehow back in the mind, when you're sleeping, you are not doing anything, you're not being productive, but not realizing the sleeping is a very productive thing to do, because in terms of the health, in terms of when you wake up, how your mind is clear and sharp, and you can able to make the good decision, right decision, and so on. Or even the fasting, the intermittent fasting. Principle is the same thing. You're giving your organs a break, saying don't do nothing.
Exactly.
When they're doing nothing, then they're doing everything for their health benefits.
That's so beautifully said. So beautifully
and also
said.
meditation is the same thing. I think all this sleep, intermittent fasting, meditation, resting, connecting, these are so much happening by doing nothing.
Yeah.
And
and I would say I would put into that same category Qigong, Tai Chi, and mindful Hatha yoga, that you're really not doing anything, but you're doing everything that the body needs, that the heart needs. And if you practice across the lifespan, what may seem like unnecessary stuff in your 30s and 40s and 50s becomes absolutely critical to optimizing well-being at every level of our biology and psychology and social connectedness in one's 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. So we just do what we can without being attached to the outcome, and then everything becomes the meditation practice. And that's another issue is, people, the more popular it becomes, the more the reporters might say, well, John, how much do you meditate during the day? Or what's your meditation practice? And I used to say, well, I wake up at 5, and I practice an hour of mindful hatha yoga, and then I sit for maybe 45 minutes or something like that. But now I can't answer that way anymore because I really, it feels like life itself is the meditation practice, and every moment, is an opportunity to fall awake or be asleep. And that the stakes are very high to not miss our moments because they're incredibly precious. And we only have them until the breath stops moving in and out of the body. So, and we never know when that is. So there's something about this that's actually, I think, transforming the zeitgeist of the planet. The more people meditate, the more it goes exponential. And I find that to be, I'm very hopeful that that's going to contribute to some of the major social and political problems and environmental problems that we're facing in terms of global warming, in terms of, sort of war and animosity and, the kinds of othering and social injustice, economic injustice. These need to be part of the curriculum of mindfulness as well, because they are profound diseases. They're diseases that generate enormous suffering. And we have to wake up to that and find ways of not curing it, but healing it so that everybody who's a cell of the body politic of the planet, so to speak, gets an adequate blood supply so that we can live a life of human dignity and well-being. And to me, that's meditation practice. I mean, there's no separation between sitting on your cushion in a room by yourself or in a cave in China or wherever, and being an activist attempting to help the world to wake up while we still have time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think, the breath, so for example, every time throughout the day, they say we're breathing 23,000 times a day, so that every breath you can be breathing as if you are somebody's holding your neck. You cannot breathe well, so you go like that, or you can be breathing very deep and slow, and just because of the breath, it's giving the message to your body, to your heart, to your mind. So just being aware of that.
Yeah.
I noticed that there were so many times in the situation throughout the day that we do not breathe properly. We hold the breath, we contract the breath, we get very tense in our muscles. But throughout the day, just for maybe you are in line in the Starbucks and trying to get a cup of coffee. You a cup of coffee, but there's 5 people before. Just because of there's 5 people before, you don't breathe properly. So instead of thinking, okay, there's 5 people before, and I know I'm not going to breathe right way. Now this is the time to breathe right, and then the people will move faster. Because if you breathe wrong, the people also seems like they're slower.
Standing online meditation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then everything becomes meditation. What is not meditation? Even deep sleep, if you're thinking about dream yoga and stuff like that. But just let's take just waking life. Every moment is either we're asleep or we're not asleep, and it's a choice that when we wake up and we recognize that this moment is as precious as any other moment, not just when you're sitting cross-legged on a cushion, but every moment. And then every person you encounter is a Buddha. Well, even the ones that you have some aversion for. Well, if you remember that at that moment, you will be in much wiser relationship. That person may not benefit from it, but you will benefit enormously from it.
Yeah, and this part, as you were saying, every moment we have the choice of either realizing or not. And as Rinpoche and the Dzogchen teachings say, right? I mean, it's either Rigpa or Marikpa. You're in awareness or in dimmed awareness or in ignorance, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and you have the freedom to really remember, which is where the mindfulness, like sati, has that element of memory. Like you just remember that wakefulness is already here. You don't even have to produce it.
So sometimes very strong emotions like anger, for example. So when anger comes, anger is automatically it's trying to act something negative way, or
Yeah.
it's automatically it's going to say something horrible, kind of very judgmental, hurtful, or even you kind of punish yourself. So anger can immediately have tendency to do specific thing, but if you catch that very moment, you can say, well, I know anger, that's what anger's plan is, but that's not my plan.
Hmm.
I have a choice. I have a choice. I know anger is going to hurt you, but I have a choice not to hurt you. I have a choice to be kind to you. So I really, you bring that awareness that you really have a choice any moment, regardless of what you're feeling or what these negative emotions are feeling. Moment you're aware of that, you're able to choose. You're able to change
Exactly.
the situation.
Yeah, beautiful. That's the power of awareness. I've sometimes found, I was inspired by Greta Thunberg, who, is like, who has, you know, um, kind of someplace on the autism spectrum, and she refers to her autism as a superpower.
Hmm.
And I've taken to actually sometimes saying that mindfulness is a superpower because it really functions that way, just as you're describing, Rinpoche. As soon as you recognize that you have freedom to respond rather than to react to what's coming up in one's own mind or out there in your world, then you in that moment you're free. There's a moment of liberation or a moment of imprisonment, and we have some degree of discernment and choice around that if you exercise the muscle of awareness, the muscle of mindfulness. If you don't exercise the muscle, then you're likely to not remember at that very moment that would be possible. And then you blame the whole world for being, if the whole world were just better, then I would be better. But because she's like this and he's like that, and I hate my job and all this, it's all the world's fault. And I don't take any responsibility for how I'm in relationship to it. And that's like pure meditation practice.
Wonderful. John, I'd be remiss if I don't ask you about your upcoming book. Can you tell us a little bit about the meditation and mindfulness for pain relief?
Well, just that this has been a long time coming because those were the first papers, research papers that I wrote were on what I was seeing among the people who were being referred to the clinic with chronic pain conditions. And the pain clinic at UMass, which no longer exists, where, sent an enormous number of people in the early days who were not benefiting from the treatments in the pain clinic. And so they were just desperately being sent to see if meditation would help. And meditation helped a lot. And independent of what the diagnosis was for the cause of the pain. So this book, Mindfulness Meditation for Pain Relief, is really a kind of synthesis of everything that I've learned from our chronic pain patients over the many years. Plus, of course, having a body, you learn a lot from your own body, and almost nobody escapes this lifetime without having at least some experiences of chronic pain that cannot be fixed by medicine and that you have to learn how to live with or heal. And so it's a series of sort of it's highly illustrated, this book. It's meant to be very, very user-friendly and calming just to look at the images. It's very artistically done. And then there are all these kind of instructional sets and then actual guided meditations that have an audio component. But I actually, for the first time, put the guidance down in the book, so that you can actually read the meditative guidance and then listen at the same time. But I upgraded the guidance, not in the audio, but in the, so there's a slight difference between the reading of the text and the listening to the text. And I'm hoping that that's actually going to be really helpful to people to feel how subtle some of the shifts can be to actually putting out the welcome mat for the unwanted, for the painful, for the difficult, for the and seeing that it is workable if you're willing to do a certain kind of work that in our case, we're talking about a work of non-doing rather than a work of fixing or trying to change anything. And to discover that that's the only liberation that I know is of any value is the liberation of this present moment. And then if you learn from the liberation experience in this present moment, maybe the next moment will be different because you've learned something from that. So it's rather than trying to achieve some reified state of complete enlightenment at the end of a long life of practice, the clarity is always available, the wisdom is always available, the compassion, it's all right here, right now, in the awareness, which is independent of causes and conditions. And that's something that I think we've demonstrated, that although it seems like it's kind of a sort of challenging meditative practice in many of the traditions, that's exactly the driving force for well-being. We talked about stress and stress reduction. Many translators now of Buddhist texts are using the word stress to translate the word dukkha. So there's a kind of one-to-one correspondence of potentiality for realizing, recognizing, and then realizing that moment by moment by moment, one can actually embody wakefulness and compassion. And I almost never talk about self-compassion because I'm trying not to reify a sense of self and privileging myself. But of course, you're not excluded from that. So the more you, excuse me, generate compassion or realize the non-separation of emptiness and compassion, or mindfulness and compassion, two wings, one bird, all of that, the more you actually become who you've been from the very beginning, but didn't quite ever give yourself a chance to inhabit. And that's a prescription for happiness. I mean, the people actually feel like, hey, I feel like myself for the first time. And people will say this, I feel like I used to feel when I was 4 years old or 5 years old. I feel like I'm finally back to like being okay the way I am, not how I'm supposed to be, and then try to put myself into some straitjacket. So that's very gratifying to see people experience that kind of thing in large numbers and then go on to practice for the rest of their lives, which people do. So 8 weeks is kind of launching platform for the rest of their lives, which was always the whole point of MBSR in the beginning. It's never meant to be a therapy. It's meant to be like Cape Canaveral, a launching platform for one's life into the Dharma.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Rinpoche, any final words before I make some announcements?
Well, it's fascinating. I think I'm happy to, maybe we can some point in the future have a little bit more conversation, continue. I was just kind of wondering about, like in some sense, different traditions, one thing over the years that I come into the West and I began to realize that, the body, the breath, the mind. So there's these three aspects. What we call three doors, and we kind of started a whole training transformational programs for the three doors. So somehow, and particularly,
did you say three doors? 3 doors?
Yeah. Yes, three doors.
So we have a whole organization called Three Doors, and we have started many years ago. We have trained hundreds of people actually, and anyway, so that the aspect is body, speech, and mind, and speech is aspect of the breath also. So somehow I feel that more and more that really the need to integrate these three things together. Even for myself, I feel like, aspect of the breath. We do the Chalung yoga and everything, but to every day bringing the breath like into awareness, like because we breathe every moment. We cannot not breathe for a few minutes. We were dead. So somehow, but we never breathe right. We never feels like a breathing in a right way. So there's a lot of improvement can be done. So I'm wondering that if what your approach is, are you trying anything you think about the bringing, or maybe you do already the breath part and the body part?
Well, this is in some sense where the mindful hatha yoga can be really valuable, because when you're moving your body in one way or another, and sometimes we just do mindful movement, standing and excuse me, not necessarily yoga formally, but you begin to realize that the breath has a life of its own. And the more you are aware of the sensations of breathing throughout the day, the more you can stand up straight or sit up straight, the more you can feel what happens to your breathing when something emotional arises. And so in that way, the more we can strengthen the breathing apparatus, the better. And that's where the mindful hatha yoga comes in big time, because I mean, breathing is such a big, important part of
for example, when you are angry, your breath is different.
Right, very.
When you are feeling peace, your breath is different. But you can breathe peace breathing while you are angry.
Yeah, so if you remember.
Key.
Yeah,
if you remember. If you remember. So I think seems like I think everybody will remember. It's like it seems like an amazing gift to know that when you can have a peace breathing when you're getting angry, or not only anger, but you're going to do something really incredible, bad thing for someone or yourself. So you can bring the breath in there to change the emotion.
Yeah,
so
and you can do that. Capture the present moment. I mean, I used to teach in prison, and most of the people who are locked up in prison are locked up in prison because in one moment they made an unconscious choice to act without awareness, and the consequences wound up with people dead, or sort of one thing or another, and all of a sudden you're in jail for 30 or 40 years.
Yes, absolutely.
So the stakes are extremely high that we actually be aware of our breathing in everyday life. It's a wonderful meditative practice, is just awareness of breathing in everyday life. And then realizing, just as you're saying, Rinpoche, that it can actually help you regulate emotion, and in very positive ways too, not just sort of the damp down on the difficult, challenging, or sort of what His Holiness calls the afflictive emotions, but also like when you're with your children or grandchildren or your friends, that you can actually make sure that you're drinking in the present moment, because it's gone in a second and it will never come back. And so we can actually go through life missing some of the most beautiful moments, and the breath can help us to actually not miss those moments.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, this has been wonderful to be in conversation with you, and I'm just frustrated that we don't have another 2 or 3 hours to dive even deeper into some of the fun details.
Well, we're happy to do that in another opportunity. And as you were talking, I mean, I relish this moment. This was so wonderful. Thank you both so much. I'm sure the audience is also thanking you. I want to let the audience know that in our next Body, Speech, and Mind, so for Body next month, December 14th, we're going to go talk about Tukdam, about the state of the body even after clinically death. And this is with doctors Tony Tidwell and Lisa Eisenberg. So December 14th, noon Eastern Standard Time. In January, we will bring, Rinpoche mentioned about the dialogue that we just had at Serenity Ridge on breath. So we'll have one of those dialogues, the one with actually Punzo Wamo, a Tibetan doctor, and Satbir Singh Khalsa, who's a researcher in Harvard and also a Kundalini yoga practitioner on breath. And then for mind, actually, two good friends of yours, John, Dave Vago and Amishi Jha will join us too. So thank you, everyone. Rinpoche, John,
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for seeing you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Alejandro.
Everyone who
Thank
makes
you.
this happen, Milos, Polly, Mariela, everyone, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cyber Sangha podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Cyber Sangha, visit us online at cybersangha.net.